The Druids were believed to possess knowledge of divination and were skilled in the arts of reading omens and interpreting dreams. Celts believed in the power of magic as well, and Druids were known to practice it, and they use things like charms and spells and incantations in their rituals. And there are historic accounts of some of the incantations, particularly I'm thinking of when the Romans invade Anglesey and the Druids are chanting and it freaks out the men, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But I'm going to go into a bit of speculative history based on my knowledge of plants. And one of the things that I think could be attributed to people reporting the Druids using magic is the psilocybe semilisata, or the liberty cap, which is commonly found in the Western European area of what would be the world of the Celt. And these are, of course, psychedelic mushrooms, but what's important here is where they grow, because one thing we do know about Celtic society from the archaeology is that they raised lots of cattle, and in particular they would have cattle in these large sort of concentrated areas protected by a stone wall, which we found many such cases of, and in fact I've found them on Dartmoor and camped near them before, so they're relatively commonplace. The ones I came across were Bronze Age ones, I believe, so this might be even before it's fair to say that there's a Celtic society that we know of, but it seems to be a practice that's commonplace in the Celtic world. And because of this concentration of animal dung, that creates the perfect environment for these to grow. And because they did lots of cattle farming, I think that these would have been readily available pretty much on your doorstep at all times. And I believe that the accounts of the Druids administering these magical ceremonies, well, I wouldn't be surprised if they're linked to things like this. In particular, they could create, I don't know, grind them down and create some sort of potion that you give to someone to drink. And if they're taking part in some sort of sacred ritual being led by the Druid, it may seem like it's the Druid creating this experience rather than it being a perfectly organic and natural process. And
isn't it the case all over the world, in all sorts of cultures and times, that the sort of priestly class are involved in psychedelics in all sorts of ways, from the Amazon to Southeast Asia, and that you commune with the spirit world or ancestors or just another worldly realm in whatever way. Wherever you can find sort of psychedelic plants naturally occurring, it seems like that sort of played into the culture, whatever culture was there.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I think that this would have been seen by the Druids as being some sort of chief way of communicating with the gods, because one of the symptoms is that you feel euphoric and almost closer to God in a way. That's why you get many hippies saying, went out into the woods and I saw God, man. Wasn't it great, man? That sort of thing. But if you don't really understand it through the modern lens, that it's just a drug, not to be too demeaning and dismissive of it, but...
Well, you called it its proper name, like psilocybin or something, what was it? Is that right?
That's the actual species of the plant, but psilocybin is the active compound in it.
Okay. All right.
But that's just the specific kind that grows on animal dung. I think there are 3 different kinds that you can find in Western Europe, that being the most common and the easiest to identify. I know this because I know lots about plants, not that I'm up to no good all the time. But yes, I think that it would hold a particular significance, and actually research recently, if there's them on screen, by the way, but if we move on to the article here, this is from Imperial College London, based on some of their research here, and it's titled Magic Mushroom Compound Increases Brain Connectivity in People with Depression. And it basically talks about how there's a compound in mushrooms, psilocybin, which creates new neural connections in your brain. And one of the problems that they say with depression is that you have rigid thinking, that you are thinking in the same way over and over again. And through it creating these new connections, it allows people to break out of that depressive cycle and almost start afresh in how they look at the world. And it's being seen as actually one of the better treatments for depression compared to some even more, I don't know what the word is, widely accepted clinical alternatives, I suppose.
Like electroshock therapy.
We don't do so much of that anymore.
Yeah,
but
you can
it's
either have
more...
electroshock therapy or some mushrooms to snap you out of your depression. It's up to you. Which one do you want?
No, it's more sort of antidepressants. So you
Right.
typically
Don't really know
have
anything about this sort of stuff.
you have them stopping the reuptake. It's serotonin, SSRIs, they're called, serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Okay.
So it inhibits the reuptake of serotonin. So when your body releases serotonin, it's in your bloodstream more than it would otherwise. So it doesn't necessarily produce any more, but it just takes longer before it sucks it back in again into the cells.
Okay.
So its effects are more known. So it seems like this seems to work more. So you would imagine then, with the scientific backing and how commonly they're found, that these would have been very useful in trying to create a religious experience. And there are also other plants that have a similar effect, but perhaps less pleasant, and that is belladonna, or deadly nightshade, and also henbane as well. There we have deadly nightshade on screen. So this is both highly toxic, and when combined together either with henbane, or you can just have belladonna on its own, but in a small amount. Obviously don't do this. I mean, it's a dangerous plant, potentially toxic, so don't go out and do this, whatever you do. The effects can be more potent. So there are alkaloids present in these plants that can cause things like hallucinations and cause delirium and even death if taken in large enough doses. But it's got the compound in this is comparable to datura, which is quite well known for making people very compliant. So in Latin America, you can get the pollen, or I can't remember exactly what it is, into the palm of your hand from these plants that just grow on the side of the road, and go and blow it into their face, and then they'll basically do whatever you tell them to. Like you can go up to someone, do that to them, and then say, go and draw your life savings out of your bank, and they'll do it.
Wow.
And
I've heard of this before. That's crazy.
And to someone who doesn't understand the weird drug effects or the chemistry behind it, or the fact that it is a drug at all, they would think that that's magic. Being able to control someone,
Right. Yeah.
and basically have them at your beck and call, even though perhaps beforehand they wouldn't want to do anything for you, and then they'll be giving you their most valuable possessions. Well, to someone who doesn't understand that, that must be quite a scary concept. And all of a sudden it seems that, well, with these sorts of plants, with that sort of power, well, what can you do to resist that? Or you want to stay on the Druids' good sides if they're using this sort of thing.
Yeah, it would seem like an incredible, some sort of superpower or something, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean, I know that belladonna, it's very toxic, isn't it? Like, if you touch it, you could be poisoned, and if you eat it, you might well die. It's that poisonous, right?
I think it's...
Like, if you mistake them for blackberries or something...
If you eat quite a lot of them, yeah, then you might die. But I think in smaller doses, it has more of a deliriant effect.
Okay.
Comparable to datura, which supposedly can have an effect for up to 3 days as well. Yeah. And I've seen accounts online, because there's no way in hell, even though it's legal to take this, I would definitely not advise doing it, that people were talking to people who weren't there for like hours on end, or like pulling the wires out of their walls and all sorts of insane stuff. Like, it completely disinhibits your ability to see yourself as an individual. You just become some sort of zombie, basically.
God.
It's quite terrifying, really.
Earlier you mentioned sort of divination as well. That it's sort of, so maybe there's would have been a blurred line between Druids and sort of soothsayers, that they're able to not only sort of commune with another world and perform magic in front of your very eyes, make people do things they wouldn't otherwise have done, but can also sort of see the future in some ways, or in their delirium they might be able to... I mean, all of that wraps up into one person, like a druid, your local chief druid or something. Well, you can see why they would be held
in high regard,
in very, very high regard, maybe just below the chief, or in some ways even supersede the chief in some sort of authority sense. Yeah, no wonder the accounts, mainly Roman accounts, like pick them out as being important in Celtic culture.
Yeah.
No wonder.
And these are only 2 plants. Of course, their plant knowledge they probably would have known all of the plants and their effects in their local area. It's not necessarily too difficult to do it. I've been trying to, just because I'm very much interested in the outdoors and bushcraft and that sort of thing, as both a means of being self-sufficient as well as speculating about what our hunter-gatherer ancestors did. And I think that you can have that working knowledge and build it up quite easily, even before you're even an adult, if you're brought up correctly and with the right teaching. And it seems like the Druids were certainly taught very well. They had, to my mind, a very stratified order whereby you had people ordained a Druid and sometimes educated, if the sources are to be believed, up to 20 years. So that's quite a long time. And I would imagine that in a society which is only partially agrarian, in that they only raised cattle, really, they did cultivate some plants, but not to the same degree as, say, the Mediterranean. They would be learning wild plants and things of that nature and ways of communing with the other world. And these deliriants, as well as the mushrooms that are psychedelics, would be 2 different sides of a coin, in that one would give you a very positive perception. It would make you want to feel connected to nature, make you feel euphoric, connecting with the gods. The other would almost be like a divine punishment that
It could kill you.
It could kill you. It can make you lose your mind. It can do all sorts of horrible things. It can make you give away all your worldly possessions, and the effects are unpredictable as well. So I find that this is more of an anthropological point, that when the effects of something are unpredictable, then people tend to anthropomorphize it as being a product of the divine, in that it's the wills of the divine that decide how this is going to affect you. You get that particularly with the American peoples with ayahuasca. They don't know how it's going to affect you, and they say it's up to the gods whether you have a good time, you have a bad time. Thank you very much for watching that short clip from the full conversation, which can be found on the website underneath my Contemplations series. Thank you and goodbye.